Hello and welcome to Mixternal Messaging. I'm your host, Cynthia Hayes, and today I'm so excited. I'm joined by Kelly O'Brien. Kelly is the Vice President of Global Communications and PR for PDI Technologies, which is a mouthful, but welcome, Kelly. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks, Cynthia. I'm glad to be here.
So first, tell us a little bit about PDI Technologies, because you opened my eyes to the scale of the world you're operating in that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, PDI Technologies is a software leader in the global convenience industry. So we've got about 800 employees globally. We're headquartered here in Metro Atlanta, not too far from where you all here. And PDI Technologies powers most of the technology at your favorite convenience stores and gas stations around the world. Okay. So we do everything from the operations to the consumer side. You've probably touched our technology without even realizing it. One of our brands that consumers do recognize is GasBuddy, the leading fuel pricing and savings, everyday savings app.
Gotcha. Okay. So the corner stores that I pass, probably 15 of them on my way to work every day. You guys are probably in like 80% of those, running technologies from back of the house to front of the house.
Good guess. We're in about 75% of the top 200 convenience store retailers. Nice work. Maybe you've done some homework. Good job. A+ for Cynthia today.
Okay, good. Gold star.
I do want to talk a little bit about the scale of the convenience industry, because until I joined about 3 years ago, I didn't really realize how big it was, or maybe like most everyday Americans, I take for granted what it means to just be able on every corner to be able to stop and get gas and get a Gatorade or whatever snack I need for tennis or just for a road trip. So I'm going to look at my notes and my cheat sheet to make sure I get this right. But about 35% of the brick and mortar retail universe is represented by convenience stores. So that's more than a third of all retailers are convenience stores.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. 152,000 convenience stores in the US. And this is really interesting. About 60% of them are what we call single site operators. So they might be entrepreneurs, they might be first generation Americans. They own one or maybe a few stores. So we don't always think about it like that. It really truly is a neighborhood and community focused industry.
Right. I do think big chain when I think major names or things for convenience stores.
That's right.
But yeah, when you say that, it brings to mind all the little places I've stopped that are clearly like mom and pop shops.
That's right. And you might see a fuel brand out front that you recognize, and then who operates that convenience store might be just a family-run business.
Right, gotcha.
And then when we talk about sort of traffic inside the store, so the average C-store that also sells fuel has more than 1,000 customers per day, or more than 400,000 per year. And that means the industry every day is conducting about 160 million transactions. 160 million transactions. We could probably do a whole separate episode on what that means, but just again, to kind of show the scale of what the industry is, kind of give a little nod to your local C-store next time you're in.
No kidding. So much appreciation for what they're doing and for how technology is critical and must be functioning for all of that to happen constantly.
That's right. Think about all the products inside the C-store and at the gas station and how many regulations are associated with those. And that's why PDI was founded 40 years ago. There wasn't really a software company or a technology that was serving those really niche, unique needs. And here we are, 40 years and about 30 acquisitions later.
Wow. Yes. So we are definitely going to touch on the acquisition strategy and the impacts of that in your role specifically, because that's a lot of acquisitions. That's a very aggressive approach. Yeah.
It is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Before we get into that, I do want to get into your role.
Sure.
So you do a lot of things. You've done a lot of things. I was glancing through. So 20 years of ad and PR agency. You've worked for major brands like Musselman's Applesauce, Mr. Coffee, Crock-Pot, GE Appliances. So consumer brands that then transition into technology. And in all those roles, it sounds like you've had your fingers in that kind of comms PR side.
That's right. I've always been on the PR and comms side. I will confess that my degree is actually in agriculture.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it is pretty fascinating, but you don't realize how much agriculture touches your everyday, similar to how we don't think about the C-store. And I will say, even now working in natural resources and food, I'm coming back to my agriculture degree all the time.
I don't doubt that for a second. My husband is actually a plant geneticist, working with ingredient companies, Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola, like all the things throughout the years. And everywhere we go, he's fascinated by at C-stores. He's constantly looking at, what's on the shelves, the ingredients, all of that. I do see it translate.
Yeah.
But how did What was your journey, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure.
Like, how did you get from ags to
I will
marketing?
say, I think, so I've been out of school a number of years now when we talk about having a 20-year agency career. We won't go through the math,
Just
but
a couple.
I do feel like I was one of the last generations to get to go to college for just what you wanted to learn about, maybe not what you had to do for the rest of your life. So I was never going to be in a park in the middle of nowhere out west. Who was I going to talk to if that was the case? But I always had sort of an affinity for communications. It comes naturally to me. I'm a good writer, and for the most part, a good talker, at least good at telling other people what to say.
That's right.
And so my first sort of job or transition out of college was working on the Hill. And I think that's the ultimate communications job, working in constituent services. I was living and working on the Hill during 9/11. So we talk about where we were in those moments.
Yes,
so
yeah.
kind of a pivotal moment, but realizing the role of communications in situations and sort of historic moments like that, I was really drawn to what could become a communications career. And then shortly after, found my path in agency life and have been through a few up and down the East Coast. And actually being at PDI is my first what we call an in-house experience. So pretty different, but being a really acquisitive and growth-oriented company helps to keep and remind us of the pace of agency life. So there's always something new and exciting.
For sure, yeah. So talk to me a little bit about your role specifically at PDI. Like,
Sure.
what teams are you interacting with? What kind of projects are you working on? Like, what does your world look like in this new era?
Now, this is not a 2-hour episode, so we'll try and synthesize.
High level, yeah.
Synthesize a little bit. So now working in-house or on the corporate side, my team, Team Tiny, we call ourselves, the communications team, average height of 5'1". So
Wow,
I'm on the lower side.
Yeah. Living up to the hype.
The three of us have OKRs for our own role in communications in 4 major areas. So in media relations, earned media relations, and sort of editorial content is one of them. Organic social media is something our team addresses. That's another area. Corporate communications, where a lot of this M&A work fits in. And then internal communications, how we talk to our global employees across the business.
Sure.
Because we're touching everything inside out, popular topic
My
right
favorite,
now.
yes.
While we're covering everything inside and out, that means we're working with everyone across the business. There aren't many strangers that I work with, which is a pretty exciting part of what we do. We get to talk to a lot of people at the C-level, all the way down to the new folks who might be at day 0, and sharing our experiences about PDI and really what our story is internally in the organization and externally. I would say some of our core groups that we work with internally, really HR and IT across a number of issues, kind of obvious there. And then externally, we work a lot with our sales organization. We are a sales-driven organization. Marketing, we report into marketing, and marketing and sales work really closely together. So we do a lot of work with our sales leaders, as well as just our leaders across the business in our different functions.
Yeah, that's a lot. You're kind of like a hub that's touching, informing, and being informed by all these different teams.
That's right.
You need to know what's going on in their world just as much as they need to know, what's going on and what kind of
if we don't know
messaging.
about it, it's hard to talk about it.
Yeah.
We make a lot of good guesses, but it's better if we're talking to each other. PDI Technologies unveiled a new brand a couple years ago. My first year we started. We had been PDI software and kind of expanded to better reflect our own sort of reach in the market and our offerings. When we rebranded, we launched a new tagline called Connecting Convenience. And I come back to that all the time. Of course, the convenience world, that's the major market we serve. We serve some other adjacent markets, but that's our major market. But that connecting word is really important to what I do and kind of is a good North Star in how we talk about our communications. I'm looking at the Mixternal Messaging board behind you, and I think having one person who's responsible for both external and internal, while it's a big lift, I won't kid you about that, I think it makes a lot of sense because we want to make sure that that's a really coordinated and connected message.
Yes, and to authentically find ways to weave that, cohesive story internally and externally is hugely important. Takes a lot of intention, a lot of reminding yourself what your North Star is, all of that you're describing. So it sounds like you're perfectly positioned to be a great influencer in that conversation, which is exciting.
And I do think I'm our most senior comms person. I report into our chief marketing officer. She's my boss, and she sits on our senior leadership team. And because of that sort of path and connection, come back to connection, I get to do a lot of sort of strategic advising to our senior leadership team. And I think that's really really critical too, because we want to make sure that the messages we're putting out externally and internally connect to all aspects of our business.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So we're going to get started. I'm going to pivot a little bit into this M&A world that you're living in, because that creates its own unique challenges. Even during the due diligence process, all the way up to, okay, it's a thing, and now we've got this story we need to tell. It's kind of a revised story, or maybe it's a continuation of a story.
Yep.
So what's it like, Kelly?
Well, I live to tell the tale.
Yeah.
I will say it's not for the faint of heart, but I didn't realize how much I would love it until I got here and doing it. So I mentioned 30 acquisitions at PDI. In the almost 3 years I've been here, we just wrapped up my 8th acquisition with the company. So highly acquisitive, focused on that sort of growth strategy through acquisition, as well as some organic growth through some development and investment on our end. But when we see something or an opportunity in the market and we realize it could help come all from one place in a better together type of story, then it makes sense to be part of PDI. So we've kind of taken that approach through time. Some of the notable ones we've done in the last couple years, one was actually a company headquartered also here in Atlanta called Greenprint, which does a lot of sustainability and helps what might be considered an otherwise not sustainable choice, like filling your tank, how to be more sustainable in that and looking at carbon offsets and opportunities like that. So lots of different messages depending on the company we're acquiring, but I would say that common thread is the thrill and the chance to do it. So a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, if you will, on how we work through acquisitions, and I'll speak from the communication side. That makes the most sense. But we have a corporate development team that leads that effort. They again sit on our senior leadership team, and then I've got some peers on the extended leadership team as well who help lead our corporate development and look at our acquisition strategy. And that work really starts with them, and then it starts to sort of filter out and connect the rest of us throughout the organization. And so when we get closer to the announcement and the closing, when we get closer to that communication moment, then I'm brought in as our communication leader, as well as some additional resources on HR and IT and all of those aspects that are going to help not only announce the message, which would be my role, but really make sure that that moment of acquisition can be as seamless as possible. When we talk about seamless, we prepare for lots of rips in that seam, but we really try and create what can be a really positive, exciting, and opportunistic moment for everyone involved.
Right, to really leverage that. There's a reason you acquired this company, right? Like they add value.
That's right.
So how do you tell that story in a way that everyone gets it immediately and gets excited about it?
Yeah, and we'll come back to the example of the sustainability company that we acquired a couple years ago. I mean, that's a really different story than we tell often. And so how to look at where our industry might be headed next, right? So we're a 2-car household, and one of those cars is an EV. Right? And a lot of households, I think, are moving toward that. I think in our eyes, or in what we look at as the vision and kind of where the industry's headed, convenience stores aren't going to go away. You're still going to need all the conveniences of a convenience store, a clean bathroom, good lighting, a place to get on the Wi-Fi, have a snack, have a drink. You're going to need all that, whether you're fueling your car or whether you're charging your car. So while we kind of exist in this sort of dual capacity, we're going to see some changes in convenience stores and how to meet the changing driver needs too. And so when we start to tell that story, it looks a little different than some of our legacy messaging that we might have experienced. And we want to make sure we're ready for that internally, especially for some of our longer term folks who have grown up in the industry in a different way and might not see that same vision. We want to make sure we've got great ambassadors internally to help tell that story, and then externally as well. So how do our customers receive that message? How does the market receive that message? How do our investors receive that message? So 3 kind of really critical audiences. And I should pause for a moment to talk about the internal audience at the company we're acquiring too. So I think that that's really something we need to pay a lot of attention to. And I will say one of the biggest sort of heart-touching moments of working at PDI is how much care goes into that. So watching our senior leaders really put the people first in the team that we're acquiring, that's a scary time. I've been through an acquisition as an agency that got acquired, and really having a lot of unknowns around that. And our team takes great care in helping to look at individual needs. And there's some great success stories that come out of that. Just heard another one yesterday when some team members were in the office about how we really look at individuals, even when we're buying a business, what the people in the team looks like.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
fantastic and so important.
Yeah.
We are going to pause here, take a little break.
Great.
When we come back, we'll dig into some more specific stories, strategies, getting your internal and external messaging aligned with all your various audiences and what that looks like. So stay tuned. We'll be back with Mixternal Messaging in just a moment.
Mixternal Messaging, Marcom that roars, is brought to you by Liger. Tired of your brand message being a whimper instead of a roar? Mixternal Messaging cracks the code on the secret weapon of B2B success, uniting your internal and external brand narrative. We're taking deep dives into the challenges and strategies to craft a message that resonates, both inside your company and with your clients. No fluff, no theory, just real stories and actionable insights from the trenches. We'll be interviewing marketing and communication rock stars, hearing their triumphs and struggles in the world of mixternal messaging, across industries from tech to healthcare. Ready to make your brand roar? Tune in to Mixternal Messaging, Marcom that roars, a Liger podcast. For more information, visit ligerpartners.com and follow us on our social media.
Welcome back to Mixternal Messaging. I'm your host, Cynthia Hayes, and today I'm joined by Kelly O'Brien, the VP of Global Communications and PR at PDI Technologies. And now we're digging into a little bit of aligning that internal, external messaging as it relates to M&As. What does launch day look like, Kelly?
Yeah.
It's such an important moment. What are you thinking about? What goes into that moment?
Well, that is, again, I keep coming back to the word exciting, and that's probably the most exciting day because I'm naturally quite chatty, right? We've already proven that. I don't need to explain that. I'm naturally quite chatty, and so much of an M&A is in a really small group and really quiet leading up to it. And so getting to be able to finally share the story, I think that's what I was born to do and that's what I'm paid to do. So being able to finally share that story on announcement day can be a really exciting way to start
freedom.
the day. It is, yeah, it's really celebratory. It helps you remember that you haven't slept in quite some time. So it's worth the payout, I suppose. And so what we start out with this sort of deal team within the organization kind of gets together that morning and waits for all of the financial aspects to close and be done. That's typically we wait until that to announce. There may be some variations. I'll kind of take you through a typical announcement day, but know whether it's like a private or a public company, there may be some different flexibility, but let's go through what an average announcement day might be. So our sort of internal deal team and maybe a few key members of the company we're acquiring will get together in the morning and kind of wait for everything to be set. And once we get the green light from the corporate dev team, then we're ready to go. And so what we start with is having the acquiring company, a leader in that company, pool together their organization for sort of a mini conversation just by themselves. We don't even enter the conversation at that point, but let them internally talk about why they've decided to sell, why they're being acquired, kind of introduce us as PDI, build up that sort of confidence, hearing from their own leadership team, and really sort of trying to get them excited and calm some maybe initial concerns or fears or nerves or whatever might come from the company that's being acquired. So we let that be like a small sort of conversation. So if that's kind of step number one, I'm going to go through, I think, the top 10 today. So let's see. Well, I'll count them down and see if we get them. So if that's step number one, that sort of internal meeting at the acquiring company, what we follow up immediately in today's world of very virtual and email communications, what we follow up with immediately is a note from our CEO. So a little bit of a personalized note reiterating some of the talking points they might have already heard from their own internal leaders, but now coming from our team and really welcoming them to the organization and telling them our views, like what's the other half of the story? Why have we acquired you? Where do we see the potential? And then what does integration look like? And a lot of times we'll say business as usual, and I think that can feel like an empty phrase, and we really try not to make it feel that way. We really want to say like, we purchased you for many reasons, and one of them is the people that work here and the great work you do, and we want to give you a chance to keep that up. So kind of just a little bit of, again, that continuation of welcoming and calming some initial nerves or concerns. So if that's number two, that sort of welcome letter, then we start to turn internally within our own organization, and we'll start with our extended leadership team. So a drop-down level from our senior leadership team, from our C-level suite, is really gathering that group together. And I I think that group kind of knows to expect when they get a calendar invite that says quick announcement. And they know at this point,
It's code 4.
Code 4, we're going to talk about something exciting, and
Yeah.
we're going to announce an acquisition. And so we take a few minutes to take our extended leadership team through that, because they oversee a lot of our organization, all of our organization at some level. And so we want to make sure that, one, we've given them the information, and two, we've given them the talking points to help distill that down. So I'll get to probably number 6 or 7 in this list. We'll get to that, what that looks like when our whole global workforce hears about it. But we want to give our extended leadership team a chance to be able to hear some of that same messaging. Because remember, it's been a really small group of the deal team. We want to start to get that a little bit bigger and make sure we've got people equipped with how to continue sharing that information. Okay? So those are kind of our first 3 steps. We're on to step number 4, and now we're ready to talk to the market. So let's get the press release live, get that out on the newswire, and start some of our media relations. So getting sort of that official communication and all the announcement out, and we've worked on that piece. That's probably our most critical communication piece, because it helps drive all of our other communication pieces. So while we may work on it first to get the external story right, it kind of falls in the middle of when we actually release it on communication day. Okay. So now we've got that out on the newswire. The news is live, we can breathe, everything's happening. So now we go to kind of our halfway mark, which is talking to our larger internal team at PDI. So we've talked to our leadership team, now we're going to tell everyone. And they get a similar message from our CEO that sort of announces why we've acquired this company, what we can expect as internal folks. Because I'll pause here for a second. When you're acquiring a company, and I might think, oh wow, I bet they have a great communications leader. What does this mean for me as a communications leader?
Right.
You know, we may have some of that same concern or nerves even internally. So we want to help people understand what that looks like. And again, having exercised this sort of acquisition muscle many times in our organization, I think our global workforce is used to receiving that and kind of understanding how that could look like. Okay, so we've told the market, we've told both internal teams. Now let's start to some of our own channels. So we go through our website and through our social properties. And those would be website and social on both ends of the deal. Mm-hmm. So PDI will make the announcements, as well as the acquired company will help put those messages out on their website. Might be a quick flash or a bulletin on the website, certainly in the newsroom if that's an opportunity, and then in social media. And often what we'll do is create social media posts for others too, so that they can help share that message and build that momentum.
Nice.
All right, so we're up to kind of the last 3, 8, 9, and 10. So after we've put the message out to everybody and everybody's had a couple hours to kind of catch their breath, especially on the acquired company, I always say, like, I imagine their internal Slack channels or their Teams network or even their text phone to be like, did you hear, what do you think? You know, we want to let people have that moment by themselves before we sort of bombard them with a lot of information about ourselves. And I think, again, we talked earlier about the sensitivity and understanding where people might be in that moment.
Right.
And so when we pull together that virtual town hall, we'll have our business leaders on there telling a little bit about it. We'll have our HR leaders on there telling a little bit about what it means during transition. And I think that HR part is probably one of the most important, because while you might be really excited for the acquisition and all the opportunities that could mean for your business and even the industry, when it comes down to it at that moment, you've got to go home and tell your partner that you were just acquired. And you want to be able to go home with confidence and say what that means, right? That could be a scary moment. And so we want to take the time not to tell too much about PDI, but really just to tell them about who we are as a company and what it means to be an employee here. So we try and do that, a little bit of that initial transition. And then the home run, we follow that up with an FAQ doc, because again, we want to give folks a minute to sit with things. And then we roll into our customer and supplier communication. So we've got a communication. Some customers may have already known in the due diligence aspect. They may have given a little bit of a heads up, some of those key customers at the acquired company and even within PDI. We want to make sure we formalize that with some communications to the customer and the vendors and the suppliers.
Right. So taking into consideration all of those different audiences, because everything you described pretty much is hitting a different audience. And
That's right.
It's a nuance to like what their concerns will be or their questions would be, trying to get ahead of that from their perspective. How do you, I know you flexed this muscle a lot at this point, but what are some like tips or learnings along the way that you've developed that you keep in mind as you're mapping out these strategies?
You know, there's a good joke of communications, and I'm sure you guys share it here, where a document is saved as final, final Tuesday
To
morning.
A, B.
Yeah. And that flexibility is really key at this moment because, again, we can have the best playbook, and we do. We have a great playbook. We can have the best people to execute it, and we do. We've got really thoughtful folks. But there are things that could happen, and they could happen. They do happen. And so how we prepare for those is just to be really flexible. And that's hard. When I used to mentor some folks just starting out in the agency world, I think it's really typical to be quite type A. I mean, I'm looking at my notes. You have notes. This is a typical model of what a communicator looks like.
That's right.
Very organized, structured, a good to-do list. I think the reality is every morning in comms we wake up and rip up our to-do list and may as well throw it out this window. And I think M&A is no different than that we can be the most planful. And again, I went through the top 10, we'll call it 10. There's probably 50 pieces of communication that come out of that top 10.
Sure.
And being able to be flexible with that and what that looks like. And it may be an acquisition we completed recently. It may be that being there in person is even more important than being there virtual. So finding a way to do that, just understanding the cultures, not just in integration, but at that announcement moment, at that moment of close, what's going to work best.
Because you are setting the tone.
That's right.
In that moment, right?
Yeah.
It is and I love hearing that you put such an emphasis on the people. How is this going to impact them? Let's let them sit. Let's give them breathing room.
Yeah.
Let's answer the immediate concerns that they know their partner will have or their family members.
Yep.
Yes, I still have a position, or hey, we're gonna 6 months do no harm situation
Yep.
and then figure it out. Whatever that.
Or guess what? They've got a way better paternity leave.
Yeah,
You
right.
know, like there might be some
Look at
policies
these
that are
cool
cooler.
benefits.
Yeah.
We're adding things, not just, and I have more professional development opportunities.
Yeah.
And I whatever.
Hey, that flex PTO at PDI is looking pretty good. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, but that takes you coordinating, to circle back just a little bit with all these internal teams to understand those very benefits that you can, like, hey, this is different than what they have now.
That's
Because
right.
it could be the same, right? You don't know unless you've coordinated and had all of those back end conversations leading up to what is different, what is better, what maybe isn't as desirable. So we're going to have to mitigate that. Like, you've got to think through all of those, plus the crisis comms potential, right? All of that.
It's impossible not to have parallel work streams. We're moving so fast and there's so many pieces.
Yeah.
And by the time this sort of announcement and close team gets activated, the window can often be small or short, right? So we've got a lot to do in a small amount of time. So, my peer on the HR side and I might be running parallel, and that's not a bad thing, I think. As long as we keep coming back together and connecting and make sure we're telling one really important, critical story,
Yes.
I think we've got to run parallel at a lot of points.
Yes, to keep pace
That's
with
right.
each other.
Yeah.
And that is part of the agility and part of the confidence in being able to do that and trust that those connection points can be meaningful really is experience.
Yeah.
Having done that a few times.
And yeah, I think so. And I think the other thing, again, having come from the client service side, and when you go in-house, you have many clients, they just all have the same email address as you. But what that looks different is really just understanding a little and having a little bit of grace for everybody in the process, right?
Sure.
Because while we're doing the M&A activity, we're still keeping up with our regular jobs, right? So we talked about the OKRs that we have, and the business still needs to run, and sales still needs to sell, and all the functions of the business still need to happen. And so realizing that while we're devoting, maybe within 2 weeks, all of our time to this, that there's still a lot of regular life that's happening here in the workforce, not to mention your personal lives. So just being a little graceful with each other. We know there's a lot that needs to be done. Sleep is low and tension can sometimes be high as we wait for things to close. And that's even just internally. But I think coming back to what you said, having the trust, like, I know the team is going to get to it and look at it, and I know we're going to get the feedback, and we're going to be able to tell the story how we want to tell it in the best way possible. We might just need a minute to get there.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about how do you know you're having the right impact, with all this communications? How are you measuring things?
That's a great ask. It's interesting. We sit in that virtual town hall that happens sort of at the end of the day, so we can introduce our HR team and kind of resolve some initial questions or concerns. And that can look different per the organization we're acquiring. An acquisition we just completed not too long ago, and actually while we were scheduling this podcast appearance, an acquisition we just completed, that whole team was on camera. which I think is really interesting and not something we always experience, that they were ready to kind of quite literally show up and show us who they were and ask some questions out loud. And we weren't, I won't say that we were unprepared for that, but that is not always typical, right? A lot of people are reflecting internally, maybe not externally. And so that town hall ended up being longer than usual and really engaging. And I think we already had a couple inside jokes with the new team. Nice. You know, it really was able to build some camaraderie and community and just being flexible with that. So you asked about measurement. I think there's a qualitative aspect to that, right?
Certainly.
So getting to hear and talk to people and see them even across a team screen really added something to that on the qualitative aspect. And then on the quantitative, we're hitting a lot of the measurements we normally do, like what media are picking up this story. Are we getting interviews from it? Are we getting questions from the media? Are we getting questions from customers? Or are we getting kudos or questions? I think that's often a good way to look at it. Saying like, hey guys, saw the news, great move. We've been needing something like that in our company. Let's talk about it. Or are we getting, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you acquire that? You know, so making sure we're being able that the story's resonating in the right way and looking at the feedback that's coming in.
Yeah.
We also do an annual brand health survey, similar to as part of our NPS with our customers. And we ask a sort of a brand related question if you understand what PDI does in the industry and the role we play. And we kind of watch that and pulse that. We started that before we launched our new brand and have kept up with it the past couple of years and have been able to maintain a 90+% with external customers. Like that's pretty, that means the messages are resonating even as we grow and change and acquire, that the brand still makes sense. And I think that's really something to celebrate.
That's really huge to continue to be trusted during all these moves.
Yeah.
Right. And acquisitions and, you know, questioning or whatever. To see that level of brand loyalty is, kudos to you.
Thank you.
My kudos. Positive feedback there for sure. So do you have, you know, we alluded earlier to you know, mentoring others coming up. Do you have some tips, tricks, advice, things that you wish you'd known 20 years ago that someone had told you about this?
I'll take the flip. I'll give an example of some bad advice I got.
Right.
I think that's as good to learn from that. I once had a female colleague, more senior than me, tell me not to waste my time becoming friends with people at work. And that was the biggest, you'll have to bleep this out, bullshit I've ever heard. Yeah, okay? Because we spend so much time at work and we need to trust the people so much, I really can't help but develop a friendship. The reason I'm here today is from a friend that I worked with.
That's right.
Right? That's why I'm a guest today. And so being able to build relationships and I can't not care deeply about you. I just can't. It's not in me. And so being able to have that time put in and what I get out of that has been very worthwhile in my career. We talked about sort of my weekend plans. I'm headed to officiate a wedding this weekend.
Which is amazing.
It's a fun side hustle. And that's for a former coworker.
Oh, nice.
And there's something special about that. I can look back. I've had, like a lot of agency folks, I've had a lot of different lives and agencies that I've called home. And I can say that I've got a few really good friends from each of those experiences that I keep up with and call some of my best friends. And that's really something special, and I wouldn't change that. And the reason that works is because I bring the same Kelly to work that's Kelly at home or Kelly on the tennis court or wherever I happen to be. I don't really have a lot of time or energy to be someone else. Like I have to just be myself, and I think that works out. So what I would encourage folks to do, especially if you're just starting out or maybe you're making a transition, is to make sure you find the place where you fit in. And if you're not fitting in, we all have that bleep on our resume, then find the next place because it's out there. You just need to find your people.
There are a lot of options. That's great advice. Yes. You always have options.
Yeah.
To look around. That's great. So to wrap up, Kelly, Liger loves to make our clients known. We like them to be known for all the right reasons and all the right places for all the right reasons. What do you want to be known for, Kelly?
Is a cartwheel an acceptable answer?
100%.
Okay. I would say, again, back to being your true self. I don't think that there's a workplace where I haven't done a cartwheel, so I'll keep up that momentum.
I love this.
But I will say, too, coming back to just being yourself, I wouldn't worry about what you want to be known for other than that. Like, I don't actually care about I care about the work I do, right? I care about it deeply, or I wouldn't have been doing it for so long or come to talk to you about it. But mostly what I care about is the people I work with and how we treat each other and how we get our work done together, and then all the fun times we get to have after. You know, I've had some team members in town this week and we were out to dinner 2 nights, and I think the dinner conversation, sure, it had some work talk, but I think most of it wasn't work talk. And that's what's really meaningful to me, that no matter what you're working on, because the work is going to change, the work is going to be different, you're going to have good days and bad days and fun work and bad work, but as long as you really get to enjoy what you're doing and who you're doing it with, I think that matters the most.
Well
Cartwheels
said.
included.
Well said. Love it. I hope you do a cartwheel before you leave here today. That'd be amazing. Selfishly wishing. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. Thanks for your
Cynthia.
time. I know you have a lot going on. It has been a pleasure to have you here. This has been Mixternal Messaging. I'm your host, Cynthia Hayes, and I'll see you next time.